With this staff, you shall do my wonders.
The second half of the 1990s was an amazing time for animation, maybe one of the best ever. In Japan, some of the most acclaimed anime of all time were thrust onto the world, and over here in America, Disney was riding high on the success of its renaissance, so much so that they even took the creative risk of delving into darker material.
What are you doing?
Meanwhile, in sunny California, Pixar and DreamWorks, two newcomers, had emerged with a fresh kind of animation that would change the game forever. But I don't want to talk about ants. Not now, anyway. If you haven't seen it yet, imagine A Bug's Life crossed with Starship Troopers, with a little bit of Annie Hall thrown in. Instead, I want to talk about the first hand-drawn animated movie that DreamWorks Animation ever made. I want to talk about The Prince of Egypt. Released in 1998, The Prince of Egypt is a musical adaptation of the Book of Exodus, regaling the story of Moses, a Hebrew who was raised as the adopted son of the Egyptian pharaoh Seti, only to reject his upbringing and later be chosen by God to free his people from their enslavement by Ramesses II, the brother that he grew up with. I'm not going to put up spoiler warnings, by the way. This story is over 3,000 years old. You could be forgiven for thinking that this is an odd subject to make a cartoon musical out of, but Jeffrey Katzenberg, who along with Steven Spielberg and David Geffen was one of the founders of DreamWorks, had been hoping for years to make an animated version of the Ten Commandments, ever since he was a chairman at the Mouse House. It was Spielberg who suggested the idea that this should be the first project for their fledgling studio.
I didn't want us to tell fairy tales. I wanted us to try and pick a interesting, dramatic, epic, embracing all the technique of animation. Steven sort of thought about it for a couple of seconds, and he sort of leaned forward and he said, well, why don't we do the Ten Commandments?
Now, during the 90s, there had been many pretenders to Disney's throne. Lots of animated musicals were released in this time period, trying to be the next Lion King, but ending up more like The Pebble and the Penguin.
Yeah, I give it 2 days tops, and you'll be in the belly of anything from a killer whale to a sardine.
But those movies usually lacked two things which DreamWorks had in abundance: money and talent. Spielberg brought in his company Amblimation, and Katzenberg brought in artists from his days at Disney. Some of the biggest stars at the time were cast in voice roles: Val Kilmer, Sandra Bullock, Ralph Fiennes. Man, everyone was hot back in the 90s. I especially dig all the men sporting one gold hoop earring. Packing the cast like this was an unorthodox move. Even Disney's MO was to have one or two big names to put butts in seats, and the rest of the cast was a working professional, usually from the stage. After all, nobody was going to see Val Kilmer's granite chin. But this method of casting would become DreamWorks' trademark, all the way to the present day. With this incredible assemblage of talent, production lasted 4 years. So how did it turn out? It begins in the midst of slavery. Egyptian soldiers are systematically killing all the Hebrew infants. Moses' mother, in an effort to save her newborn son, says goodbye to him forever as she places the baby in a reed basket, which gently flows down the Nile to the royal palace, whereupon he is adopted by the wife of the pharaoh himself. After this introduction, we cut years later to a chariot race between a teenage Moses and Ramesses.
Hey, Ramesses! How'd you like your face carved on a wall? Someday, yes! How about now? You almost killed me! Oh, come on! Where's your sense of fun?
It's an amazing sequence. It and the following scenes set up the primary conflicts of the story. Moses has grown up as a spoiled brat, and Ramesses craves the approval of his father. It's their brotherly bond that's the heart of the movie, and it's what creates the dramatic tension when Moses finally returns to demand that his people be set free. Without it, this would be just another pompous swords and sandals flick. The stage has been set. Any doubts that this might be another kiddie film are vaporized the first time you see a Hebrew whipped by an overseer. Everything about this film is a subversion, not just of animated tropes, but of biblical ones too. Instead of exaggerated round proportions, all the characters are sharp, angled, and ethnically accurate to the people of the region, which is something that biblical movies still can't pull off. You remember Moses from Wales, right? The style was so unique that they continued it for 4 more movies, and it never grew stale. I had always thought of DreamWorks Animation as having 2 totally different styles of filmmaking, traditionally hand-drawn animation and CGI, to which they later fully transitioned. I knew that they used some CGI here, but I was surprised to learn how extensive it actually was. The first shot in the movie is of computer-generated clouds, and they never stopped using the technology, preferring to weave the CGI and hand-drawn layers together to create a unified style.
In this sequence, we used the 3D extras in combination with 2D drawn animation.
So it's no wonder I underestimated how much there was. It all looked so seamless. Mostly. From the beginning, they were clearly comfortable using software to enhance their artistry. No, not comfortable. Liberated. There are so many shots that would have been prohibitively expensive or flat out impossible to achieve with a fully hand-drawn movie.
3D CGI techniques were used in this sequence to impart stone texture and lighting effects. The extreme rendering style was designed to be a unique stylistic environment within the film.
And the music? Oh my son, the music.
Look at your life through heaven's eyes.
Playing with the big boys now.
Playing with the big boys now.
Oh, that's pretty. Every spell and gesture
Tells you who's the best.
You're playing with the big boys now.
There can be miracles when you believe. When you believe, though hope is frail, it's hard to kill. It's hard to kill.
The songs and lyrics were written by Steven Schwartz, and Hans Zimmer composed the score. These men are legends of their chosen arts. The music was so good, they released 3 different albums of it. One of the official soundtrack, and then country and gospel editions that each featured completely new songs inspired by the movie.
All I know is that whenever we showed the movie to yet another musician, they wanted to write something. I mean, at one point I had all these people coming in and out of the studio saying, can I please write something for this movie? So suddenly we had this wealth of music, this wealth of songs.
Hans Zimmer has gained a reputation recently for being the dun-dun guy, and this is partly his own fault. But people have unjustly forgotten that this man is one of the most versatile composers for film in the last 50 years. His score here is epic yet delicate, authentic to regional musical forms but magnified to Broadway proportions. It's so harmonious with Schwartz's songs that it feels like they were both written by just one person. The way the score will frequently call back to previous songs at certain moments, and even foreshadow others is the cherry on top. 2 examples. The theme when Seti appears was actually played for the first time during the chariot race, for just a brief snippet, when the statue of him comes on screen. It subconsciously establishes his presence and authority before we ever see the pharaoh himself.
Not for long. When I pass into the next world, then you will be the morning and evening star.
One damaged temple does not destroy centuries of tradition.
But one weak link can break the chain of a mighty dynasty.
And when Moses revisits the royal palace during the Plague of Darkness, treading the same path he took as a young man, a mournful instrumental of All I Ever Wanted, the second song of the movie, is played.
Sweet perfumes of incense, graceful rooms of alabaster stone, all I ever wanted. This is my home.
All I Ever Wanted is itself another example of the subversion I was talking about. Lots of musicals feature an I Want song, a song played at the beginning of the movie, usually the second because the first song set the scene for the world we're in, that explains who the main character is and what their deal is.
All I want is a room somewhere far away from the cold night air.
I want to be where the people are. I want to see them dancing.
I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was.
But All I Ever Wanted is different. It comes at the point of the film when Moses is told that he is not an Egyptian, but a Hebrew, and the son of slaves. All I Ever Wanted is about him questioning his identity, framing it in past tense, as he tries to convince himself of what he desperately wants to be true. During the plagues, the song will be brought back again, this time with verses from his brother, now enemy, Ramesses.
Let my heart be hardened, and never mind how high the cost may grow. This will still be so. I will never let your people go.
And again, unlike other musicals, all of the songs are in service to the story. 2 of them used to portray the passage of time. There's no song that I could take out and the plot still makes sense without it, with the possible exception of Playing with the Big Boys. And even then, that song establishes the power of the high priests, and their resistance to Moses' demands. Even all-time classics like My Fair Lady have songs that don't have anything to do with the main characters and just kind of waste time. And bad ones like The Sound of Music are loaded with time-waster songs. After Moses is visited by God, he journeys back to Egypt, and the plot is then driven by the skirmishes between Moses and Ramesses. They're each other's mirrors, both struggling under the burdens of being leaders of their people. Ramesses is without a doubt the antagonist, a man with serious daddy issues.
Ramesses has his little hiding place where he goes to try to
which ironically is actually in the lap of his father.
Yeah.
But he's not a soulless monster. His greatest flaw may be that he feels too much. Torn between his love for his brother and his duties as a pharaoh, he's prone to lashing out when wounded.
You Hebrews have been nothing but trouble. My father had the right idea about how to deal with your people.
Ramesses.
And I think it's time I finished the job.
Ramesses.
And there shall be a great cry in all of Egypt, such as never has been or ever will be again.
When Moses finally returns, Ramesses is overjoyed to see him and welcomes him back to his old position as prince. Master of his ancient world, he's accustomed to life being fixed and unchanging, and any unpleasantries can simply be resolved by his own decree. Moses is the one man who won't bend to Pharaoh's will. Maybe that's why God chose him. This won't be the first time in the movie that Ramesses wishes to turn back the gnomon of time.
Why can't things be the way they were before?
The relationship is symbolized by the ring that Ramesses gifted Moses in their youth. On leaving Egypt, Moses tears off every piece of Egyptian jewelry and luxury, except for the skirt obviously, but falters with the ring. When he returns it years later, we know that something has died between the two of them.
I'm sorry.
And Ramesses takes Moses' demand for his people's freedom as a personal insult. During the 10 plagues, what does he sing?
You who I called brother, how could you have come to hate me so? Is this what you wanted?
His city is burning all around him, roaches all up in his bread, no rain on the store shelves, and he manages to make it all about himself. I suppose that's to be expected for a man who claims to be the morning and the evening star.
I am Egypt, the morning and the evening star. I am the morning and the evening star.
Ramesses.
I am the morning and the evening star.
The temptation for a film that is yet another adaptation of Exodus is to be long, like this damn review. All of the versions run over 2 hours, and the 10 Commandments approaches 4. But watching the director's commentary, I was amazed at how much is not in the movie. All that they cut out to make the story more intimate and to underplay scenes.
Ramesses still has an issue to deal with.
Yeah, without being blatant, I think at one point we had him reach for his knife or his sword or something, which is like, yeah, that's a little too cliche.
There were scenes where we wanted to cut back and see him preparing his army.
And when they did add bits, it's telling that they were usually details that enriched understanding for the audience, or reinforced the personal conflict between Moses and Ramesses.
I remember Jeffrey was concerned that it was all spectacle and we were losing the personal story.
Which he was absolutely right about. Yeah.
So we had to go back and add more shots of Ramesses and Moses.
There are so many wonderful little details that I never even picked up on before. When Moses attends the banquet in Midian, he reaches for the food and is reproached for it.
Not yet.
Oh, sorry.
because as a prince, he never would have had to wait to eat food. And when Ramesses remembers the good times that he had with his brother, he fiddles with the ring that Moses gave back to him.
But then, you were always there to get me out of trouble again.
The scene with the burning bush is the ultimate example of how the film is able to walk the line between nuance and grandeur simultaneously.
So I will stretch out my hand and smite Egypt with all my wonders. Take the staff in your hand, Moses. With it, you shall do my wonders. I shall be with you, Moses.
Damn. Cartoon Val Kilmer is a better actor than live-action Charlton Heston. When I see the tears fall out of Moses' eyes, I understand just a little bit the gravity of this story for the faithful, and that this movie is able to transport a non-believer like me to that place is really the best compliment that could be given. Okay, there have to be things to criticize, right? No movie is perfect. I don't really like the goofy animal humor. It's kind of out of place. It takes up literally less than 10 seconds of runtime though, so whatever. Plagues of Egypt happen maybe a little too quickly. We go from Plague 2 to Plague 9 in a 3-minute music montage. Otherwise, yeah, that's it. It's a masterpiece. I have seen The Prince of Egypt probably 8 times over the years. On VHS from Blockbuster, DVD from the library, streaming on Netflix, and now finally, I own it for myself on minty fresh Blu-ray. I was a little concerned when I rewatched it for this review. Maybe it didn't hold up like I remember and I was blinded by nostalgia, but even my roommate, when I showed him this film for the first time, came away from it with his socks blown clear across to the other side of the room. He declared it even better than The Lion King, one of the best movies he's ever seen in his life. I feel the same way. In the end, it made 3 times its money back and was nominated for several Oscars, even winning Best Original Song. Although, I'll admit that was a weird year for the Best Song category. Nothing from Mulan was even nominated, but The Horse Whisperer was a contender. That's actually a pretty great song though, so I'm not mad. So why does nobody remember it? I'm not exactly sure, but I think I have a notion. First, in some Muslim-majority countries, it was outright banned due to a prohibition in Islam on visual depictions of Abrahamic prophets. So that explains why someone in Malaysia may not have seen it. But what about over here? Well, it has been adapted in recent years as a successful stage production, so obviously some people know about it. And it looks fun? Man, it's amazing how they managed to make real people look faker than drawings. The film itself? It may be due to a few factors. Part of the fault could be laid at DreamWorks' feet themselves. After the monumental success of Shrek and the colossal failure of Sinbad Legend of the Seven Seas, they've seemed eager for you to forget that they ever made hand-drawn movies. But I think the biggest reason is due to a cultural shift in what audiences expect from animated features and what they receive. Biblical movies aren't really blockbusters anymore, so even back then, The Prince of Egypt was out of place in the landscape of mainstream animation. But these days, when even children's TV shows are CG, it may feel like a relic to some people. This 20th year anniversary interview says it better than I could.
You look at other films and say, yeah, they're building on what we did.
Yeah, they stopped trying to draw them.
I think that The Prince of Egypt is forgotten because it was the first ripple of a new wave of American animation that never came to pass. In this cyberpunk dystopia of a world, computer-generated imagery has become the new default, and this movie was probably just overshadowed by the novel technology. It's no small irony that it was DreamWorks itself that led the charge into the new digital age. If that bums you out, you may find consolation in knowing that our modern world makes watching The Prince of Egypt easier than ever before. It's streaming on multiple platforms, and you can get it on Blu-ray for less than $10. This is a film that breathed life into the stolid clay of a story that people have carried with them longer than any nations of the world have stood. And it may outlast them too. The journey of a man who rejected the boundless privileges of his nobility to return to his people and lead them to freedom has stirred the hearts of the oppressed for generations. The tale is timeless. So is the movie.